This is George Gruhn and Jay Meyer from the Martin Company, October 2nd, for our weekly question and answer session. And since Jay is here with me, I'll let him introduce himself and a bit of his background with Martin. And we even have one question that a viewer has already given. So I'm turning it over and let Jay talk.
How we doing, folks? Jay Meyer, again, like George said, with Martin Guitar. Been down here in Nashville for almost 7 years, working hand in hand with George and Gruhn Guitars, which we've had a lot of success and fun with the sinkers over the last handful of years. So I'll just dive right into it for the most part. Myself, I started at Martin as a child. I would say a kid. You know, I grew up inside the company, building, doing wood, stuff of that nature. I stumbled upon sinker mahogany back in about 2008. And it always fascinated me. It smelled different, looked different than any mahogany I've ever seen. And so Mark Frisbee, I hope I said that right, from Minnesota, you had a question basically about how or why did I come up with the sum of parts of sinker mahogany. So me and my best friend, Emily Meixel, we used to work very close together. She was in the custom shop for many years. I started in this position and we always talked about making something awesome with the sinker. But when we say awesome, I don't mean aesthetically beautiful to where it's a showstopper and it stops somebody from walking by because it's beautiful. I wanted, and we wanted to build or design a guitar that stopped people in their tracks over the sound. And we came up with the D18 Golden Arrow being one of the best guitars Martin ever built sound-wise. So we took this sinker mahogany and we added it to the, not just the back and sides, the neck, the front block, the rear block, and the kerfing. So the only wood on there that is not sinker is the soundboard. The bracing is all Adirondack red spruce. And then the fingerboard and bridge is your typical ebony. But what really proved to be amazing was we did about a dozen of these. I think it was 15 to start. And I brought them throughout my territory. It's 6 states now. So I brought it out, sold, you know, about 10 or 12 of them. Came across one that just stood out amongst the other 10 or 12 I had first. So at this point, I knew I had something. So I brought it to my biggest critic, which is George Gruhn. And knowing George for better part of a decade, I've never seen him react the way he did when he first hit that guitar. Strummed it, hit a chord. Within 10, 20 seconds, he asked me, "What is this? I want him." Right, George?
That's basically it. I had never seen a new guitar do what these did, or what that one did. That guitar inspired me.
So that right there set a bit of a fire in George's brilliant mind, and we took it another level. And we don't just offer the Dreadnought 18 anymore, but we do a 4/0 and a 4/0 12 fret slotted headstock. 3 different styles, basically, with another 3 being sunburst tops. So 6 total were the original sinkers, and we've been doing it for the better part of, what, 3 years?
Yes.
3+ now?
Yeah.
And it is amazing. It's fun to be a part of. A lot of people in Nashville or my territory know me as the sinker guy. So I just, my buddy Brian, I know you're out there watching. Thanks for everything, man. This wouldn't be as big without you. You know who you are. I'll see you soon. But
yeah, the Sinker D that you brought by not only inspired me, but it got me thinking immediately that we don't need this only in the D, that what would happen if we did the same thing in the quadruple O size 12th fret and in the standard 14 fret, because I'd already been doing some of those in mahogany and in rosewood. for several years prior to that,
Right.
going back at least 10 years. But all the things that I had been designing, those same concepts would work with Sinker Mahogany, which I didn't know anything about. Now, there had been a Sinker that was a show special some years earlier.
Yeah.
It was shown at NAMM. It was a D41, was it?
It was a 41 or 42. I think it was a 42. And the issue that was, most people, again, it's the NAMM show, so it's very difficult to hear there. You know that.
You could see it, but you couldn't hear it, and it looked like it was a D42, except it cost more, and it was in mahogany.
And it had a Sinker's top as well. It was all Sinker.
Yeah, and so it didn't
do it justice.
And a Sinker mahogany top, rather than Adirondack spruce, just doesn't give you the sound. It's not the best use of that wood. It never gave me a reason to think that Sinker was special, because the wood didn't look phenomenally different. And so far as sound, A, you can't hear it at the show, and B, if you did order one, it wouldn't have sounded great because it had a mahogany top. It's terrific wood for the neck, back, and sides, but it's not terrific wood for the top. Adirondack spruce is the terrific wood for the top to pair it with. But at any rate, we ended up, after hearing the D18, adding other models, and now we've also added 12-string guitars and 12-fret quadruple O 12-string, which are some of the finest sounding 12 strings I've ever heard. And we've also, in addition, added the OM model, which has turned out really great. And
I can read that if you want, George.
Yeah.
This is not regarding Sinker, but it's a good question. So we see it here from Marshall. What is your analysis of the tonal qualities? And 2, the customer acceptance of the 2 different materials, rosewood, Indian, used on the backs of the MTV1 and MTV2 editions. So you're asking about those 2 specific editions that we did many, many years ago. I think the MTV2, I was building guitars at that time, but they had like different sides and the back. I think the side, one side was maple and the other side was rosewood, and same thing with the back. I think that's what you're referring to. Those guitars are hard to catch up with today because a lot of people collected them because MTV is a thing of the past for the most part. I mean, it's still there, but it's more reality TV than music television, if you will. But yeah, I've seen them here and there, but they're hard to catch up with. They're really cool guitars. If you want to elaborate on your question, we'd be happy to answer it more in depth. But we don't make those anymore. They're no longer part of production. And I think it's been about 17 to 20 years since we did the second version.
It was a limited edition.
Yeah, we only did
and
a handful, I think.
And frankly, I don't see any great number of requests for them.
No.
And I think that, frankly, having a different type of wood, half the back, half one, and half another type wood was strange looking, and I do not think it was a better sounding guitar. It was an interesting looking guitar, but if we're designing guitars for a player, I wanted to pass the blindfold test, which is don't look at it at all, play it with your eyes closed, and guitar that sounds and feels right and responds right and feels alive to the player. That's the guitar that I want.
Yeah, and that's
where
what
the Sinkers do.
That's where we were coming from a design standpoint. And the reception, when we first hit the road with them, Emily and I, we would go out on the road together and do events and such, and we would sell 2 or 3 at a Martin experience, if you will, or just hanging out in the shop for a few hours. And at that point, I kind of knew we were onto something, but he reaffirmed it and took it to another level here in Nashville, allowing for many artists and high-profile players to get their hands on them, which has just made a huge bonfire out of all this. And thank you for all the support out there. If you haven't played one yet, you should really think about getting your hands on one here at Gruhn, or buy one, they'll send it to you. I got a question from Tom Sweeney. Can you explain where this wood is found, how long underwater, etc.? Yeah, this wood comes from Central America. I'm going to be a little vague because I can't, tell you exactly the vendor and all that stuff. But my buddy who does this, been friends for a long, long time, before I was, ever thought of here in Nashville. But they procured this, they pulled it out of the water. It was cut down in the late 1800s, about 1880 to about 1900. Some earlier, some maybe a little later, but that was the time frame when they were really clear cutting. And when I say they, I mean the Spanish, for furniture and stuff of that nature. And they would float these logs down the river. And the biggest and most dense logs would only float for so long, and they would sink to the bottom. So he started pulling these up, and when he cut into them, and he immediately contacted us and said it's the coolest thing he's ever seen. So I was like, all right, well, let us know when you're back in the States and we'll check it out. And it just blew up. It's unbelievable where it is today. And we're just, so gracious that everybody just loves these guitars to the capacity and volume that they do. I hope I answered your question. Jerry Black, why is the CEO7 such a great guitar? Well, I'm glad you love that. CEO7, that stands for Chief Executive Officer. Chris Martin designed that guitar. That was a 7th addition to his designs. That guitar is genuine mahogany back and sides, neck, front block, rear block. So it's the real deal from Central America. But the other thing, it has the Adirondack top. And it's one of those nice, small, intricate guitars that also boasts a really great sound and will kind of punch if you dig into it. And that guitar has been so popular, we just can't take it out of the line, because a lot of the times those CEO7s will be a limited run of 100 or maybe 250, but something of this stature, of popularity, I should say, has just brought this to another level that we have got to keep it in the line, or I think a lot of consumers and partners like George would be disappointed not having a hook or having it on a hook in their shop. But
okay, well, we've got at least some good Martin stuff. We have other questions.
Yeah, we got one here. Was odd that you used 2 different woods. Just wondering if that ended up being a good idea from a tone point of view. So this goes back to the MTV1 and MTV2. Again, those are more collectible or collector's pieces. Tonally, using 2 different species, I don't think it helped. I've played a few of those guitars. I've seen them in shops every once in a while. Again, I think it's more nostalgic that it says MTV on them than the 2 different wood species, personally. But
if we have no other immediate questions for Jay,
I think we got one here.
If we do, we'll take it.
So Doug Barton just asked, what glue do we use on the sinker models? Again, this is a player's guitar, and what I was trying to do is keep the price point to an achievable manner for purchasers, consumers. And if you go and use hide glue, it's going to push the retail up about $1,000. So the first one, the D18, we wanted to keep it with the white glue and keep that price point low enough so it's achievable, again, for your everyday player to go and purchase. So you feel like you're not bringing out your, vintage or high-end collectible guitar. Brandon, I love my D18 sinker, but typically play smaller guitars. Why aren't there any single lot, double lot size guitars in the lineup? Well, Brandon, we just haven't gotten around to designing those or putting them in George's line, because the frenzy has really been with the Dreadnought and the 4-aught 14 fret and the 4-aught 12 fret slotted headstock. I'm not saying we can't build you one. Please contact Rob here at the store, and we can put one together for you and get it in probably within the next, I would say 6 to 9 months.
I would say there's another reason in addition, and that is that there is a limited capacity that the Martin Custom Shop has, and that there's also a limited amount of this wood, especially neck wood, that we are currently ordering enough that if we design more models, we're going to actually end up being able to get fewer of the models we want.
Right.
Because there's a limit to how much Martin can turn out. We're not the only Martin dealer that orders custom instruments, and Martin does have some limits to capacity, especially even now during the COVID virus crisis. Martin's having difficulty keeping up with their demand.
Yeah, demand is very high right now.
I could order more models, but I probably couldn't get more guitars.
And from a sales standpoint, here in Nashville, the majority of players that I come across crave that dreadnought still. And it rings synonymous in the industry, I guess. And we've had a lot of luck on sell-through with that. But again, I'm not saying we cannot build it for you, because we can build anything. Just get a hold of Gruhn Guitars, talk to Rob, and we'll be happy to put it together for you.
But also keep in mind that we do offer the OM size in a sinker, and that is a 15-inch wide guitar. And the double O is a 14 5/16 inch size guitar. The OM is not all that much bigger. If you want a guitar that's smaller than the quadruple O or the D, we have it. We have the OM, which is only a tiny bit wider. It's 14 5/16 for a double O, and it's 15 for an OM. So we do have a smaller guitar in the line.
I would also add to that, if you don't like reaching over a dreadnought, you could always try the 4/0s, because they're not as deep on the sides. They're triple-aught depth. So reaching over them, you'll still get the boom and the sound of a dreadnought with a little more comfort.
And the OM is also a shallower body
Yes,
guitar.
correct.
So that the physical comfort of holding it is great, and the response is very much that of a smaller body guitar. We have a question from Tom Van Tilburg. In past sessions, I'd asked you about the proper way to string my Les Paul with the stop tailpiece, and you said that strings should go through the tailpiece and over the top. When I look at your website and at Les Pauls that you have, I can't help but notice that 99.9% of them are strung with strings going straight through. Why is that? Well, it's not quite 99.9%, but it is the majority of the ones we have. They can be strung either way. The original stud-mounted wraparound bridge, like this is a Les Paul special. You can see how it is there. And you can see that those holes are small enough that they're not countersunk for the string ball ends, but they are designed for the strings to go over. But this is a bridge. Now, when they came out with the stop tailpiece, they basically used that same design, but when they did it, they did indeed countersink it so that you could put the ball ends without them sticking out much. They are countersunk, but you can see it's about the same. Now you can string it straight through as this one is done, or you can do it looping and over. The sound difference is pretty minimal, but if you want to get more tension downward on the bridge, if you string it straight through and you put the tailpiece down, you will get more string tension downward. Frankly, it is easier to string it straight through. If they didn't intend for you to be able to do that, they wouldn't have countersunk it. But if they had designed it only for stringing straight through, they probably wouldn't have designed the stop tailpiece with the holes on the other end where you can do it countersunk. So if you look at this one, you can see that it is still countersunk. So you could string it either way. And it works just fine either way. And
We have a question, sorry, George, from John Hatton. Howdy, gents. Any possibility of using Spanish cedar for neck in building smaller body guitars? Yes, we will do that for custom shop guitars, or if you want to take a standard guitar and change some stuff out. Again, just contact Rob here at Gruhn Guitars and we can help you out.
We have had Spanish cedar necks on some dreadnoughts, and there were models such as the CS2111 that came out in 2011, but that featured Spanish cedar for the neck and also Madagascar rosewood for the back sides and for the fingerboard and bridge, and that turned out to not be such a great combination.
I don't think it was the neck barrel that was the issue. I think it was more of the Madagascar rosewood fingerboard. Correct.
It didn't give the structural stability of Indian rosewood or ebony, and those necks gave problems. Probably not as much due to the Spanish cedar, but overall, I think mahogany as a neck wood is a bit stiffer.
It is stiffer. Spanish cedar can sometimes be porous, very soft in nature. If you ever carved a neck or fit a dovetail, you know what I'm talking about when I say that. You know, when you use a chisel, it could crumble because of the porousness. But yes, we will still use Spanish cedar on necks if requested. It is not something we typically use for everyday production. Again, Spanish cedar is something that doesn't come in an abundance anymore like it used to. It's slowing down in the procurement world.
It's also worth noting Spanish cedar doesn't grow in Spain.
No.
It isn't really a true cedar.
True.
It's a South American wood that's more closely related to mahogany.
Correct.
It's not a conifer, as would be true cedar, but it smells a good bit like cedar. So they called it cedar, and the Spaniards used it for guitar necks, but Martin used Spanish cedar on necks from the early period of even as far back as late 1830s on some of their guitars.
Right.
And right on up, it was their standard neck wood through 1917. But that was a time when Martin guitars were not steel string instruments, but were gut string instruments and had less tension on them. And my general feeling is that for steel string guitars, what we order for our custom guitars, we've tried both. And I think that my own opinion is that on a steel string guitar, I recommend a mahogany neck for structural strength and stability. But the biggest problem with the CS2111 was the Madagascar rosewood fingerboards, which just didn't.
I know that model intimately. That's when I was still the wood manager for Martin. And that model, I actually weighed every single part, the neck, the fingerboard bridge, the back and sides, the braces, to get it under a certain amount of weight for the totality of all those parts combined. I forget the exact weight it was, but we got a question here from Gary Marini. What is the playability like between the 12 fret and 14 fret? I love the look of the 12 fret slotted head. Is the quality of the wood on the sunburst the same as the one unfinished, no color? Thanks, guys. I love these. Gary, I'll let George answer the playability part, but as the quality, the tops are both the same grade. The sunburst tops, again, will hide some cosmetic flaws, but these guitars, again, were designed to be the most aesthetically pleasing for the affordable sinkers. They are designed to be the new tool for players, artists, creators to hopefully inspire them to make their next hit or something that just means a lot to them. And I think as you see, as you have a sinker in your hand, over time, they just get so much better, like a fine wine. Wouldn't you say, George?
I think so, but one other thing I want to address is that it was not simply a matter of making the sinker affordable in selecting white glue versus hide glue. I've listened very carefully to the sinker guitars with non-torrefied Adirondack and compared them to new Martin guitars with hide glue, and particularly with torrefied or the VTS Adirondack tops. And frankly, I find that the difference of hide glue versus white glue is such that I find it to be quite insignificant. If I thought there was a significant improvement and it cost more, but gave enough difference that I could truly hear it, I would be offering the hide glue, but my ear tells me otherwise. I find that the sinker mahogany guitars that we are offering compare very well to the Authentic series and other hide glue models. So we were able to have a guitar at the right price point and with no compromise that my ear could detect on sound or on the playability of the instrument.
George,
everything I know about how to make a guitar sound really right is there in the sinkers that we have. I don't feel that we needed to add anything more to it to make it better sounding. We could add more ornamentation to make it more expensive, and we do have some that have more ornamentation and are more expensive. But so far as adding something that would make a notable improvement in sound, I don't know what it would be.
George, what do you think the difference, this gentleman, Doug, was asking about the 12 fret slotted head versus the 14 fret?
The 12 fret slot head model has two things that can make it sound different from the 14 fret with a solid peg head. One is that on a 14 fret neck, they typically have a solid peg head and they have right angle tuners, and the tuner shaft sticks up above the peg head, and the peg head angles back at an angle from the plane of the fingerboard. But if you have these strings fastened to posts which stick above the surface of the peg head, the break angle over the nut is quite different than on the slot head, where the tuner posts go through that slot. So in effect, the strings are now, the post is recessed halfway into the peg head. So the break angle of the strings over the nut is completely different. The slot head gives much more downward pressure on the nut, and this does have some impact on sound. In addition, Martin 12 fret guitars have a body that is 2 frets longer than the 14 fret model. So for example, the 12 fret and the 14 fret quad are both 16 inches wide, but the 12 fret body is 2 frets longer. The air chamber, therefore, is a bit bigger on the 12 fret model, and the position of the bridge with relation to the end pin or the end block is about the same. In other words, the bridge is not any different in position from the bridge to the bottom end of the body, but the position of the bridge with respect to the top end of the body at the neck joint, it's a longer air chamber between the bridge and the neck joint. So it is a different position of the bridge with relation to the length of the body, but it is actually still the same distance from the end pin part, from the bottom end of the guitar to the bridge. It results in a different sound, and the 12 fret models tend to be a bit louder and a bit more punch. On the other hand, the 14 fret models have their own character, which is plenty good. It gives quite a bit of sound, a sustain, a bit less pop, but it does give fine sustain either way, but they are different, and it is a matter of personal preference. I personally really am very, very fond of the 12 fret models, but the 14 fret and the 12 fret are slightly different flavor, but they both taste good is sort of what it gets down to.
Here's a little comment from Doug. It's not a question. I have a 4/0 12 fret slotted headstock Sunburst. Bought it here in March. When Michael strummed it, who's his son, he knew he was going home with it just about immediately. He said the tone and sustain were just amazing. Doug, thanks for that note. That really means a lot to us here. Elizabeth, you have a question? I bought from Gruhn a 12 fret Martin 4/0 Sinker Mahogany. Would installing pickups reduce the value of the guitar over time? I would say go non-invasive, go in the sound hole and put something in. Don't cut a hole in the side. But as long as you use pretty good stuff, you know, Fishman, LR bags, whatever your ear prefers, you should be okay with a non-invasive pickup. Here's one from Mark. Question from Mark. Why no VTS Addy tops for Gruhn custom sinkers? You want to take that one, George?
I have answered this question almost every week, and I am personally not a big fan of the VTS or torrefied wood. There's been a great deal of advertising promotion on it. It does change the basic harmonic structure of the notes. To me, it does not sound as rich or full. I think it is less sweet sounding. It emphasizes the dominant part of the note, but it gives a less complex harmonic response. It is good from a point of view of being very structurally stable with not expanding or contracting much with changes in humidity, but it does not give the same sound as naturally aged wood. I prefer the non-torrefied, not VTS tops. I'm very specific about that. I've mentioned it pretty well every week. And
may I extend on that, George? I think with the amount of experience George has had over the years here in Nashville and what the general public and consumer market coming to Nashville or traveling here are looking for, that guitar that will sound great, but also age over time with them. And the VTS does lock it into that certain decade of the 1930s we're striving for. But with George, he likes the sound of a brand new top breaking in over time. And a lot of his consumers have also said, and I mean the purchases, sell-through rate have shown the natural tops are just great guitars as well.
They also don't take very long to break in. If you play it hard for even a few days at high volume, they change in tone dramatically. And so it's not that you have to, I'm not advocating playing it for 20 years to get it to sound as good as a VTS top. I'm telling you that I like the sound of it better instantly.
Yeah. So
it sounds really good. I prefer the tone.
We're not saying we won't build you one. If you want one, contact Rob here at Gruhn and we can put a custom quote together for you. We'd be happy to get you what you want. Charles, how will the one-off custom shop special order guitars hold their value against standard run models? Well, I like to think anything Martin guitar will hold its value. Custom shop is that cut above, little extra attention to detail. And I would venture to say they will hold their value.
Well, I would like to add to that it depends on what the specs are of this custom guitar, because there are some things that are one of a kind, and it might be that that's because no one else has ever wanted one like that. You can order some things custom order that we might not think, or that most other people might not think are a great idea. If you design something that's wonderful, it can hold its value very well. But when something is extremely rare, if it's a vintage guitar, we find that sometimes it's extremely rare because no one else ever ordered one like it. And the specs might be pretty strange. We see sometimes people order something with an extremely wide neck or an extremely narrow neck or custom inlays such as their name down the fingerboard. If you order specs that nobody but you would ever think would be good, then it's not going to hold its value very well. But if it's tasteful, if it's a sensible design, it should hold its own. But one-of-a-kind custom, if it's designed so specific to your tastes that no one else would like it, that won't hold its value very well. It depends what you design. Being one of a kind does not necessarily mean it's a great design. And think rarity, if it's a standard production model, it's extremely rare. That tells you it wasn't successful in the market when it was new. And some things can be a prototype that they look at it and say, ew, and they don't make another one. Others are just something that was designed before its time, maybe like the Explorer Gibson with Flying V. When they first came out, they were too weird and people didn't accept it, but they sure wanted it later. Or the Lloyd Loar F5 mandolin that came out in 22, but that was in an attempt to kickstart mandolin sales. Well, that was a bit late for that because the mandolin orchestra boom had died and bluegrass didn't exist for another 20 some years. Martin made a few custom instruments, things like a very occasional harp guitar. I once had a 7-string guitar that had been made for William Foden, and the neck bulged out so that the first 3 frets you could fret on that 7th string, and then the neck narrowed down so the rest of the neck was standard. And it was bizarre. It suited William Foden, but nobody else. So if you design something that someone else might like, it could be a great investment. But if you design something that is so
left field,
specific to you only, you know, how well it's going to hold its value depends on how good was the design.
You have a question here from John. I would like to get a better understanding of how a custom shop guitar is constructed by Martin as compared to a non-custom shop guitar as it relates to the custom shop. I presently own 3 Gruhn Martin custom shop guitars, a D18 Sinker, 4-21, and a D21S. The difference between the standard production line is you have a large volume of guitars going through, and a luthier, craftsman, somebody working on the bench might do 2 or 3, 5 jobs as they get better as a builder. In the custom shop, we hand select those. Today, I believe we're right around 25 employees, and these employees are usually the master of their related areas. If you're a rough fitter, neck fitter, carver, you're the best of the best. And it does take an extensive amount of time to really get to that point, to know enough to entertain the option of going into the custom shop. So I hope that helps explain it a little better for you. The standard series guitars are really well made. They're great guitars. And the custom shop is just, again, a lot of folks that have been doing a long, long time trying to craft the perfect guitar for whomever's buying it.
There were also some things you can only have done in the custom shop. For example, the hide glue.
Hide glue, authentic features.
Or if you get a T-bar in the neck, that's not done except in the custom shop, is it?
Correct. Yeah, stuff of that nature. The old, all the authentic line is done in the custom shop because those necks are all hand-shaped. So the extensive handwork will definitely be done in the custom shop of different variations. The T-bar, like you said, George.
T-bar or hide glue are both features you get only custom shop.
Correct.
There's plenty of custom guitars that don't have to be made with that.
Right.
And quite frankly, also it was a very deliberate decision on our part to put in an adjustable truss rod rather than the T-bar. I have experience with both. And while the T-bar is great, if you actually have any neck relief problems, you can end up with $400 of work on something that with an adjustable rod would be a 30-second adjustment. And we found that on the sinker models, we did not hear a tonal improvement to have a T-bar versus an adjustable rod. Martin charges less for the adjustable rod. It's easier to work on. We also made a very deliberate decision to have a drop-in saddle rather than the full-length long saddle that's glued in place. Because if you ever do want to adjust action, it's so much easier to do it. If you have a drop-in saddle, you can just work on grind the bottom down rather than trying to work at it from the top, in which case you have to redo all of the intonation adjustments. And the other way, it's easy. So something that would be a 5-minute job with a drop-in saddle would be a 3 or 4 hour job with a glue-in saddle. And we also do not hear a tonal difference.
And again, to go back to the foundation of that particular guitar, having the adjustable truss rod, having the ability to take out the saddle easily is big for individuals that are buying this. So Gruhn's team here can have the ability to set the guitar up the way a picker or a player wants. When you glue in that saddle, you know, you're kind of handcuffing yourself to that height. So
well, you can adjust it downward, but it's hours of work. And if you ever want to take a saddle out, like if somebody wants an under saddle pickup, which in general I don't really recommend, I think that the best pickups are those that do not fit under the saddle, because an under saddle pickup does impact the acoustic sound of the instrument. You can take a guitar that sounds superlatively good, and then when you put an under saddle pickup in, it goes from superlative to pretty darn good, but not the same. Less dynamic range, less volume, and just tonally not the same beast. I'd rather have an internal pickup that does not fit directly under the saddle, but the sinker models that I am offering are easy to adjust. They sound great, and I feel that they are they're great. I like them the way they are. They have good wood. The quality of the wood on the Sunburst models is the same grade of wood that's used on the ones with the natural finish. If there's any that has a little blemish of any kind, it's a lot easier to hide that if we do it Sunburst. But the fact is, the wood grade is the same. And within that, we picked the prettiest tops for natural, but there really isn't, they're still the same grade from Martin's pile of wood. When they grade it as to which grade category it is, it's the same.
We have a question from Doug. Please contrast the detailed difference between the adjustable truss rod and T-bar. You want to take that one, George?
The T-bar is a tempered steel bar. Martin started using them standard at the end of 1934, and they were using those until the late 1960s, after which they went to a square, hollow, non-adjustable tube, but it was a square tube. And in 1985 is when Martin started using standard, an adjustable rod. The T-bar is very rigid. If it's done right, it works great. But there are times when weather change and things can still move a bit. And if you need to adjust, if you have a neck twist or a neck warp, any kind of relief problem with a T-bar, there's not much you can do short of plane and refret, which is going to be expensive. It can be quite stable, but if you do have any problems, it's really expensive and difficult. And even things such that you go from if you're doing a gig and you're in Key West, Florida one day and Telluride, Colorado the next,
You got some problems.
Things move. And that's where an adjustable truss rod sure makes good sense. That just the T-bar, as good as it was, in my opinion, is just not the way to go with the technology we have now. And the technology, actually, Gibson came out with adjustable truss rods in fairly early 1921. And, but they had a patent on it that others couldn't do it until after World War II, because they had a patent that was renewable once, and after that, it's open market for anybody, goes into public domain. But
Folks, that's why I like
it a long time to do it, but I think it was a good decision to put adjustable rods in. And at this point, unless somebody is very insistent on it, we've already had enough experience with working on guitars with the T-bar that we're experienced at it. I like the old guitars with a T-bar, but when it comes right down to it, in today's world, the adjustable rods are so good, work so well, and people travel so much and go from humid to dry, and even summer versus winter here, it's much more humid here in the summer than it is in the winter, especially in a house with central air in the summer, with central heat in the winter. The humidity change is considerable. And if you're a low action freak and you really want things to play really easy, not just high action bluegrass backup, have it set up where it's really comfortable, the truss rod has a lot of good things that can be said for it. And so far as sound, my ear tells me that the ones with the adjustable truss rod sound just fine.
That's why I like hanging out with this guy, folks. He teaches me something every time I'm with him. It's very advantageous, and just, you know, I'm honored to be his friend and you know, partner in this music industry. It's a lot of fun to sit by and hang out with somebody that's been around the music industry for 50 plus years. So thanks for everything you do, George. Really, I appreciate it.
I certainly value my association with Martin, and you personally have made a lot of it possible. That Jay's been great to work with, and Jay is one of the few sales district representatives who has experience working in the factory, actually building guitars, and also a background in wood purchasing. Most salespeople have just that. They're salesmen. They represent, and they may know the product quite well, but they wouldn't know how to actually build it themselves. They didn't ever work in the factory building. And Jay has not only worked in the factory, but how many different departments have you worked in?
Oh, it's probably close to 4 or 5, probably about 5. The sawmill, acclimating. I was hired there as a binder. I used to glue on the binding track all day and do the inlays. So yeah, probably about 5.
But the point is, most people who do binding or
phrase or rough fitting, top and back sanding.
Yeah, but the point is, they don't work as many different positions. You can have somebody who works at Martin for 40 years and basically cut braces the whole time, or did binding or sprayed finish, but they didn't do anything else. You've worked in different departments, and you've worked in the wood department, purchasing. And when you talk about acclimating, you're talking about acclimating the wood.
Right, drying it properly, making sure it acclimatizes to the proper moisture content and sits long enough so you can bend the sides and work with the glue without it falling apart.
The point is, you know the guitar from the inside and out. You know it from the raw materials.
Yes, sir.
To each process along the way. And then it's been, for the past 7 years or so, the adventure has been actually selling guitars. You didn't sell guitars previous to that.
My original, step into the sales realm, if you will, was when I was the wood manager. And this was about 12 years ago. You and some coworkers of yours came in, employees of yours, I should say. And that's when I met you. So I used to, select all the high-end sets of Brazilian or Sinker mahogany or whatever George would want to design or, for his shop here. And over a few years period, I just got more comfortable talking about the wood and helping partners design stuff that would sell through. And it really developed into a really good program. We still do it today as much as possible. Today's a little more digital, because we can't travel as much. And right now Martin is shut down to outside visitors because of COVID-19 and all that fun stuff. But it's been an awesome ride coming from an hourly employee binding guitars to meeting you back in the day in the wood room. And now today we're hand in hand, hanging out, partners, live down the road from each other.
Like 2 miles apart.
Yeah. Got a question here from Dave King. Why doesn't Martin put a strap button under the neck so I don't have to worry about my guitar losing value when I install it myself? That's a really good question. We will put it on if our partners ask. If George or the sales manager, Rob Ruff here, puts in the purchase order, hey, we want strap buttons, we will do it. Obviously, it's another charge. But a lot of the time, consumers on the outside might not want the gold strap button versus a silver or what have you. So we kind of leave that in the hands of the consumer, just like electronics. Yes, we do Fishman and LR bags from the factory to our partners, but again, those are more special orders. We'd rather leave it open-ended so you as the consumer can talk to George or Rob or whomever and say, you know what, instead of an LR bags or instead of a Fishman, I want a K&K. And you guys are more than capable of doing that for somebody.
Some people who play primarily at home or go to occasional jams at friend's house never use a strap. They sit down and play. They don't play standing up. And if you don't play standing up, you don't need a strap button. And some of these people don't like the looks of a strap button. If somebody wants a strap button, we have plenty of them in our repair shop. It takes 5 minutes to install one if you know how. We can do that just as well as Martin does, and we charge absolutely zero extra to do it. So if you want one and you buy it from us, we can put it right on for you, and it'll look exactly the same as if Martin installed it. But the other fact is that not everybody even wants the strap button in exactly the same place. There's a little bit of variation that you can do it, but we can do it just fine. And with pickups, it's basically the same thing. If you order a pickup, Martin will charge for the pickup and a bit extra for the installation, and they have a limited number of pickup options. We offer more pickup options here, and we can install it just fine here. If you want a pickup, we can put it on, but we don't recommend under saddle pickups if you're primarily an acoustic player and you really want to keep the best possible acoustic sound. We're not going to recommend a pickup that goes under the saddle, but not everybody wants the same pickup. And that's Skill doesn't use the same type pickup that numerous others might, and some people like bags, some people like guitar, some people do like the Fishman, or they want a K&K, and we can stock multiple different pickup options, and we can install a pickup in a guitar in maybe an hour, but the point is it's going to cost you no more to get us to install a pickup than to get the manufacturer to do it. You have more options, and the cost is not going to be any different. But if we order a guitar with a pickup, that's in, and it's going to appeal to fewer people.
Exactly.
From the dealer's point of view, if I order a guitar with no strap button and no electronics in it, that guitar is a platform that can be set up with or without. It takes 5 minutes to put a strap button on if they want it. And it takes maybe 1 hour to install a pickup if they want it. We can service them and do what they want We can set it up the way they want, but installing a pickup, you're putting in an end pin jack, that's drilling out that hole a little bit wider. We can do it where it's very neat and clean, and we can do it as well as the factory can. But if you're not putting a pickup in, we just put the standard end pin in. And it's the end pin's in the case pocket. Martin ships it with the end pin out, which is a bit safer for transit. But the point is, there's no need to install a pickup. From our point of view, we'd be better off to receive it as a great acoustic guitar. If somebody wants a pickup, we can put it in. If they want a strap button, we can put it on. But if you don't know how to put a strap button in, don't try to do it yourself.
Don't.
Because you can split, if you think
you crack that heel.
Yeah, if you think that you're just going to simply take a screw and screw it right into the neck, you start it in a wood screw.
No.
That's bad news. You can split the neck. So you can, if you don't have the right tools and you don't know what you're doing, instead of having a 5-minute installation, you can cause hundreds of dollars of damage. But we can put in a strap button in a matter of a few minutes. We know how, it's no problem. But not everybody wants a strap button.
And that's pretty much why we don't do it. We got time for one more question. This comes from Jim. Exactly how much old Brazilian mahogany does Martin have in stock, and how often do authorities show up to audit and review? Back in the day, when I say that, almost 8 years ago, when I was the wood manager, I could answer this question in depthly, but that is something we don't share publicly. And again, I don't have access to the inventory numbers today. But when it comes to authorities or people showing up for audits, usually once a year, annually, you'll have an FSC audit, Forest Stewardship Council. That's if you abide by those rules. They'll come in and inspect stuff and make sure everything's up to par with labeling, inventory. It can get pretty in-depth, but I used to conduct those annually for Martin. With having such an extensive record of procuring wood back to the 20s and 30s, I think, is in the files. We're really organized, and we can answer just about anything those auditors need to know about.
Now, also, if you're talking about old Brazilian mahogany, a lot of the old mahogany isn't Brazilian.
Correct. A lot of it's Central American, Guatemala, Belize. To get stuff out of Brazil, mahogany, I've never come across any new procurement out of Brazil for mahogany. That's really a country that's very difficult to get stuff out of for the most part, even today, with all the Brazilian transition so negatively, so quickly from the 60s to the early 90s. Martin really got their hands away from that before it got bad.
Well, and certainly Brazilian rosewood, that's the Dalbergia nigra, that's not coming out, but there is still mahogany in Brazil.
There is, but again, there's a lot of red tape around it. It's very difficult to get it. So a lot of our stuff is sourced sustainably, responsibly out of Central America.
Well, one of the things that Martin is very firm on, Chris Martin has been active with the conservation efforts, and you can certainly mention a bit of his involvement with that, but Chris Martin will not permit Martin to use any wood that is not properly documented. And these days, with the Lacey Act, to be legal, it must be harvested according to the laws of the country of origin, as well as the laws of the USA and international law. And Martin does not buy wood that is not documented. So
won't even entertain it.
The fact is that Martin, if they get audited, all they need to really show at this point is they show the documents where they got it. And
proper chain of custody through
that the wood
FSC,
supplier,
CITES, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Those are your three big.
Yeah, when you buy the wood, it is documented
Mhm.
by the supplier that you buy it from. You don't buy wood that is not accompanied by the right documents.
Correct.
So if the authorities come in to inspect,
There's nothing even to worry about.
you have, Martin has meticulous documentation on every piece of wood they buy. So there's nothing shady about that.
Not
They have
at
some
all.
wood that they've had in stock a long time, like some of the Brazilian rosewood, of which they have very dwindling amounts. But Martin doesn't have a lot of wood that they've been sitting on for 50 plus years.
The only species that we've been sitting on that long is the Brazilian. Other than that, a lot of the old mahoganies and stuff of that nature have been used up and, built great guitars over the years. Not to say, the sinker mahogany is almost the replacement for that Brazilian mahogany. The sinkers is something that's a cut above all the other genus species in the mahogany pool. That's our opinion, my opinion for sure. But
and lately, some sinker mahogany has turned up. It looks like it could be as old as the 1850s.
yes, sir, that is correct.
And,
That's hot off the press.
Yeah, so we hope to have some of that soon.
Yes, sir.
And but Martin is building far better guitars today than they did 50 years ago. But 50 years ago was 1970, and that was not exactly the golden era of guitar building for Martin, Fender, Gibson, whatever. In 1970, Taylor didn't even exist yet. But the fact is, Taylor has been around since the earliest ones that Bob would have done would have been about 74. And I would have to say that new Taylors are also way better than their earliest ones. And I know that Taylor would tell you so as well. And for individual luthiers, typically their best guitar is not their oldest one, it's their newest one. But Martin's been around since late 1833. They made some wonderful guitars in the 1920s and 30s, but you have to figure in 1933, Martin had been in business for 100 years. So right now, Martin's challenge is to make the best guitars they can today. And interestingly enough, the best guitars they can make today happen to be way better than they were in 1970, and in my opinion, way better than they were 20 years ago. I am inspired by the guitars I'm receiving, especially the models that are made to my specs. I may be a little bit prejudiced there, but Jay and I have worked very, very well together. And we've come up with things that I feel are not only great bang for the buck, but they're just plain great guitars. And we've had, I mentioned earlier about the OM models. I've been selling some of those guitars to people who have some very, very, very fine old guitars. I have an architect in Washington, D.C. who's bought an OM and several other sinkers from me recently. And he also owns originals from the 1920s and 30s. And he was a bit skeptical when he first ordered one. He just got to see if what I was saying was actually real. And when he got an OM, his comment first was, well, it's almost as good as his old one, and it really shocks him how good it is. And I told him, well, just play it really, really hard and loud and let it wake up. It takes loud playing to wake it up. You don't have to play loud every moment you play, but if you want it to wake up and break it in, play it really hard for a few days. And you can actually tell almost to the moment when it really wakes up, and it's almost like it suddenly goes into hyperdrive, like on Star Trek, and whoosh. It's literally, you can tell from across the room, people listen, say, what happened? All of a sudden, your guitar is louder. And then even when you pick it up, even after that, you generally, it's like an athlete warming up. You got to do some warm-up exercises, and then you do your routine. Well, with an athlete, they do some warm-up exercises. They're not as vigorous as what they're going to do later, but they do warm up. With the guitar, the warm-up exercise is the opposite. You play it ridiculously loud for about 5 minutes, and then it's limbered up, and now you can play it soft and pretty too. and it has better response, but you do have to wake them up. And it may take only a few minutes, but it is best to give your guitar a little bit of wake-up exercise. But anyway, my architect in DC, after he'd had the guitar for a week, he says, you know, it's changed so much that I'm wondering now which is my best guitar. These things are actually doing pretty amazing things on sound. And he's not alone in discovering that the guitar changes. And it doesn't take years to wake it up. They start out sounding plenty good, and with even as little as a few days of playing it hard, they wake up dramatically. And what we are doing is guitars that we feel really are great instruments. They're not simply designed to be something to impress in a glass case. I mean, we do have like the Gruhn 50th anniversary model sinker. It has plenty of ornamentation. It's got pearl trim on the front, and it's got a fancy peg head inlay with the equivalent that looks like the Martin decal plus a torch. In fact, I just have one right here. I can show it. Right here, we have that peg head, which is pretty. There it is. So that is an attractive peg head, and then just going upward, you can see it's got pearl trim. It's got master grade spruce.
Adirondack spruce,
Yes.
which is, that's tough to catch up with, folks. Adirondack spruce, because it's overexposure and use over the years by many, many different industries. The ability to get the large Adirondack trees 16 inches around and larger is a difficult task these days. So to get master grade tops is a feat in itself. But maybe we could use another day to do a segment on tops and grading and all that. That would be
We've
good.
pretty much covered our time. Now,
Yes,
we had plenty of other questions. Normally, in our regular weekly sessions, I cover a wide variety of questions. And I know that a bunch of people may be disappointed that they have not had their questions answered this week. These questions are not going away. I have all your other questions. I will get into those next week. So questions that did not get answered, since Jay and I concentrated on Martin today, will be handled next week. We will have more than enough questions. None of your questions are tossed. They will be responded to. In the meantime, we live in an obviously weird, unstable, crazy world. You know, political situation has been crazy enough, and today our president is showing early stages of COVID virus infection. And whether you agree with his politics or not, we wish him well, because for our country, we need stability. We need to have an election process where we can make logical decisions. We need to have debates where both sides can present their views. And we want to have an election process that runs smoothly.
I still think there should be a
government that runs smoothly.
There should be a mute button on the mics.
Well, my suggestion for debates.
That's all I'll say about it.
Well, I have a suggestion there, and that is that each side, if they have 2 minutes, that guy's mic is on and the other guy's mic is off.
Mute button.
And then when it's the next guy's turn, there's no mute button.
Sounds logical to me.
No, you don't want to have the moderator have to mute somebody, because then they'll say, you didn't treat me fairly. You let him say a sentence more than you let me say. No, when it's your turn, your mic is on. And when it's not your turn, the other guy's mic is on. That's sort of the same as in a court of law. If there's two sides and you have attorneys for each side, if one attorney keeps interrupting the other attorney, they don't have a shouting match. The judge says, it's his turn, and if you do that again, I'll hold you in contempt of court. And the way these debates have been run, both sides would have been held in contempt, and they would have been called back to the judge's chamber and been reprimanded. And if they kept doing it, she'd have them held in contempt and charge them and have them locked up.
These are just some of the conversations George and I have. But folks, I really hope you enjoyed my time on the show today. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Anytime I get with George Gruhn and the guys and gals here, I thoroughly love coming into Gruhn and supporting this amazing account. If you've never been to Gruhn Guitars, I highly suggest you stop into Nashville and check out the Sinker series and our Standard series and George Gruhn.
Well, I enjoy doing these sessions. I look forward to next week. And as I said, all of your questions are important to me. And today we handled really only Martin plus the one person who asked me several times before about stop tail pieces and how does one string the guitar. And it basically gets down to you can string it either way and it works just fine. And if they didn't want you to be able to string it straight through, they wouldn't countersunk those holes so you could do it that way. So clearly they were designed where they can be done both ways. But every other question we attended to today was about Martin. This is a special session, but all those other questions, they're not going away. Next week, I'll get to them. Till then, have a good one. And we live in a crazy world. And oh, the crystal ball, you know, it still works. If you look through it, see, everything's upside down if it's at a distance. Right now, our world is crazy. But if you hold something straight onto the crystal ball, see, that comes through. You can get it's a magnifier, and it sees things right side up, close up. But from a distance, it's all upside down. And we live in crazy times. But till then, have a good week.